Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, John Knocklinger. I'm a men's divorce coach and a New Jersey divorce attorney and mediator. Today, we're going to talk about guys reestablishing an identity after divorce and facing the next chapter of your life bravely and with confidence. My guest for this conversation is Cody Jones. He is an entrepreneur, fitness advocate, personal growth enthusiast, owner and founder of Absolute Landscapes, and the host of the Pure Wisdom podcast, which you guys have got to check out. He believes that mindset, health, and personal growth are foundational influences on our lives, and I agree with that 100%. Thank you for being here today, Cody.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me. Super excited.
Great. So I have a lot of questions for you, but before we even get started, we had all this stuff about fitness advocate, personal growth, all this stuff. And then in the middle of that is Absolute Landscapes. So just tell us, what is this? You're an owner of this company. So what do you do there?
Yeah. So when I was right before I turned 21, I was 20 years old. I started a business for the simple reason that I just felt like every job I was in, I just felt like I was not supposed to be there. So I started a business very young. And I just turned 31 a couple weeks ago. So over the last decade, I've learned a lot just from being in business, just about myself, about the business, about working with people. And it has really been, and not just financially, but just with my own personal growth and the things that I have learned, it has really been one of the most fulfilling experiences of my life. I've met some great people. I've had some great experiences. And it's really just, it almost is crazy how a business forces you to evolve if you want the business to survive. And you could almost say that this whole, the personal growth enthusiast was sort of birthed from the business, because the business certainly came first. So yeah, it was just a catalyst for, I think, a lot of the things that sort of, when we speak of identity, sort of shaped me into who I am is came from that revelation, came from the business, we could say.
Well, and as you are probably the poster child for personal growth precedes professional growth. So always, no matter what you're doing, if you don't work on yourself and get yourself in order, you really cannot be successful.
100%.
All the most successful people in our world all have worked on themselves a lot.
Absolutely.
So that's great. But, we're talking about like guys that've sort of gone through this trauma of divorce, and, it's something that beats you up. It just like beats the living crap out of you. And, guys are coming out shells of themselves for a lot of guys for many years before that, they were sort of shells of themselves. Because divorce doesn't just happen overnight. It's usually a process where, you're deteriorating your relationship. And part of that deterioration, a lot of times, Cody, is guys don't take care of themselves. They don't take care of themselves, mentally, physically, spiritually, like in every kind of way. They just don't take care of themselves. So I think a good place to start is, what do you say to this guy who's coming out of really any traumatic episode in their lives? And we'll just say divorce now. How do they get themselves back on the right foot? Like, what would be the first step you would tell them to do to sort of start down the path of reestablishing this identity of who they are?
So one of the reasons that identity is so important, and it's so important to understand your identity and not lose your identity, is because when things come around, as they certainly will in life, to test you, you have to have something to reference to respond to. So in other words, if you are a person who is into fitness or into health, you have already made up your mind before whatever challenge presents itself, whether it's an injury or a schedule or whatever. You have already made up your mind that you are going to do this thing. You are going to be into fitness. You're going to go to the gym, however many times, whatever. You've already made your mind up. So you have this thing that you have to reference. And I think, a lot of times with relationships, I think you're right. I think we sort of, especially in the relationships that tend to not work for us, we lose that sense of ourself with the relationship, whether it's because the relationship tests us or because, it was not good for us or whatever reason, toxic, whatever it was, we lose that sense of identity. So it makes sense that when you say that these guys are shells of themselves, that makes sense. And I think a lot of times what happens is, when we get in a place like a marriage where we're comfortable like that, we sort of lose I don't want to say the passion or the desire to continue to improve ourselves, but I think a lot of times that's lost, because I've talked to a lot of guys who are in this, and I mean like guys of all ages who are in this spot, and it's like when they're in that spot, it's so easy to focus on, okay, let's just maintain the status quo. Everything is good. Everything's okay. But it's like when that moment comes, when the divorce happens or when the relationship ends, it's like, oh, I really need to be taking care of myself. So this is a long-winded answer to your question, but I think the importance of the identity is to know how you're going to respond when these things happen, and how to build this identity. I mean, we could talk, that's a several hour conversation. I don't know how deep you want to get into that one, but yeah, I don't know. I don't want to go off on a long-winded answer here, because I know we're limited.
No, it's okay. I think that's a pretty good foundation for this conversation. So to give our listeners a little idea about, who are you, Cody, and why should we listen to what Cody's telling us? Give us a little background about how you got to this point where you started becoming, personal development sort of enthusiast and a fitness enthusiast. Give us a little window into your background.
Sure. So, like I said, 20 years old, started my own business, and for the simple reason that I honestly felt suffocated working at a company. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I just knew it wasn't that. And so that was, 10 years ago now. Learned a lot from dealing with people, a lot from myself. I learned a lot about myself, how I react to things, how I come across as things. I feel like I'm a very driven and sometimes assertive in a lot of things that I do, which sometimes to some people can be taken the wrong way. To some people that can be overbearing, and it's important to have that self-awareness about yourself. So I learned a lot about myself, a lot about how to interact with other people. When I was so in around that time, I had a long-term relationship, a very just not good relationship, not bad people, just bad together type thing. And that lasted on and off for about 6 or 7 years. Well, about 6 years probably. When I was 25, my mom passed away tragically and suddenly. My mom was murdered. And so it took us all by surprise. Of course, nobody, you never see that kind of thing coming. My mom I was very close to my mom. We had a very good relationship. I was very thankful for the 25 years that I had with her. And when that happened, that was a realization that I had, is like, okay, there were many realizations, but one of the things that really got me through that very painful time was that, first of all, like I said, I was grateful for the time I had with her. But if I was going to continue to pursue the path that I was currently on, it was one of those life lessons, man. And it's like, nobody is going to, at the end of the day, nobody's going to be there for you the way that you can. You can have all these things in your life. You can have the perfect job. You can have the perfect spouse. You can have the perfect parents, perfect siblings. But at the end of the day, you are with yourself 24 hours a day. And when these things come along to test you or to push you or to challenge you, going back to the identity, you have to know how you're going to respond. And a lot of times we kind of figure that out on the fly. It's not like nobody sits around and imagines like, oh, if my mom is murdered, this is how I'm going to react. But a lot of times we figure these things out on the fly. And it's like the decision to continue to progress forward or to let these things influence our life, it all comes down to your personal decision and how you want to continue to pursue, progress in life. So that was one thing that really it changed my outlook in so many different ways. And I'm sure it's kind of obvious how that was the case. But sometime around, so between 25 and 30, there was another relationship involved, not really a good relationship in that either. That was not a good relationship. Somewhere around 27-ish was when I got into the whole fitness thing. Around, because I just turned 31. So around 30-ish, I started practicing training martial arts, just because the simple fact of learning a skill. I don't have any ambition to be a professional fighter or anything, but martial arts, I think, is a really good way for men specifically to, it's a skill to learn, but it teaches you. It's one of the few things that there's not many things that will teach you how to take a loss the way martial arts will. And it can be a humbling experience, which I'm sure we all know excessive pride can be very damaging. So I don't know if that's the sort of the nutshell version, sort of the condensed version. There's a lot, there's a lot that was in that 10 years, man. Like I said, a lot of unhealthy relationships, unhealthy relationship with myself. Even when I was younger, I was simply not a confident person. And, it's hard to say why that is. Maybe it was environment, maybe it was peers, maybe it was just simply that I was not taught how to believe in myself or how to be confident with myself. But whatever it was, whether it was a combination of all these things, there was a lot of things going on in my 20s. And hopefully, if I handle those things correctly, hopefully what I've learned then I'm going to be able to use, from here on out and continue to learn. Because I think the thing for a lot of us is Tony Robbins refers to this as constant and never ending improvement. I think there's always room for us to grow. So, and that's where the whole personal growth aspect came in.
Yeah, sure. And I will say, you said something on your podcast that I really think encapsulates your history and what you just took our listeners through, which is being proud of the path, or the I guess the man you've become, but also be proud of the fact of the path you didn't take.
Exactly.
Like you went through all this stuff in your life, and you could have ended up not the put together person that's become, personal development enthusiast, a fitness enthusiast, probably a very successful entrepreneur, by letting all those things beat you down. And so many of us let those things in our life beat us down, and, become the poor, sad, poor me, always wanting everyone to feel sorry for you instead of taking the bull by the horns. So I think I love hearing like that kind of history. I mean, what happened to your mom? I mean, I can't even imagine. I mean, very few people have to go through that kind of trauma in their life. And that's 10 times worse in a lot of ways than what we're talking about divorce. So the fitness part of this I'm really interested in. Is it sounds like the fitness part of this kind of started after you started, starting looking at yourself and being introspective. Talk to me a little bit about how really taking care of your body, both, through through exercise, nutrition, all of that. How does that actually sort of mix with the personal development part? I mean, are they essentially the same thing? Does one drive off the other? Like, how do those two things come together when you're trying to really become a better version of yourself, I guess is a way of putting it.
I got you. Yeah. So I always say that fitness is really like a cornerstone of your development and who you are. And the reason is, we think about being fit, we think about being healthy, and we think about, longevity and having a healthy life and all this kind of thing. But it's like fitness is like the main cornerstone of, or one of the main cornerstones of your personal improvement is it, because like, not only do you filter out your diet, the things that you eat, where you drink, what do you, those kind of things, but when you start to do that, it is a very common occurrence to see somebody start a fitness plan, and then within a couple weeks, a month or so, or whatever it is, also cut things out like alcohol, cut things out like excessive, clubbing and that kind of thing. And so what that does, not only does it limit the alcohol, and I don't have anything necessarily against alcohol, but this is just the path that people typically take. It limits the alcohol, but then what it's going to do is put yourself in a different environment. So when you filter out what goes into your body, whether it's food or water or drink or whatever, you then get to a point where you start to, because you're caring about you're taking better care of your body. You're conscious of your body. You care about what you do, what you eat. So once you do that, then you start to filter out what comes into your mind, what comes into your body mentally and spiritually and emotionally. And once you start to filter these things out, then this puts you in a place where you are, I mean, there's no other way to say it other than where you can better take care of your body. And this is not just because the physical aspect, the physical health of it is just one small portion of your general health. Because we talk about fitness and we talk about, what you eat and your diet, but a lot of us, we don't think about our emotional health. We don't think about our mental health. We don't think about our spiritual health. And you don't have to be a spiritual or religious person to think about that. It's just your spiritual and mental and emotional health, all these things are factors. And so the reason that I push fitness so much is it's not just because, yes, it's a good thing to be healthy. It's just that this is usually a catalyst for other areas of your life to improve. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Oh yeah, absolutely does. And it's just, I think that's the way I've always looked at it, as a catalyst. It's kind of
Mhm.
like, I mean, at its most simplistic, you're right. It's like you just start going to the gym every day. And you start trying to be fit, which I know isn't the same as going to the gym, but
Mhm.
you start trying to be fit. You're probably going to want to eat better, and then you're probably maybe going to want to not do self-destructive things like maybe drink alcohol or things like that. And it just sort of puts you on the path, so to speak,
Mhm.
because you really can't live a healthy lifestyle and not do something that's, you can't like eat bad and have a healthy lifestyle. You can't sit around all day and not be active and have a healthy
Mhm.
lifestyle. It's all part of it. And I think that's something that, again, a lot of guys forget about. It's easy when you become stressed out to stop being healthy in all the
Mhm.
different ways. And, I see it all the time with guys going through a divorce to become, have really bad substance abuse problems, being alcohol or taking some kind of prescription drug or even illegal drugs. And they were never like that before, but they've let life pound them down, that they turn to these things instead of the more healthy ways of encountering stress or dealing with stress.
Mhm.
Because not everyone's like you, Cody. I mean, not everybody goes through a shitty time and turns it into this good thing that you've turned it into. So I guess make it more practical for listeners. You're going through this really bad time. Um, is it as simple as, listen, if you've never exercised, if you haven't been exercising, just try to start baby steps and start exercising. Just do one step at a time, add one thing into your life at a time, and hopefully it'll become a domino effect. Is it as simple as that?
I think it really can be as simple as that because with the social media world that we live in, man, and we have the Facebook and the everything, it's easy for us to look at somebody else and say, oh, well, this person's in the gym 5 days a week. I haven't been to the gym in years. I can't do that. But it's this comparison. I think there's a phrase that says comparison is the thief of joy. And I don't know anything more accurate than that. But it's like, if you get yourself into the door, first of all, getting into the door is one of the hardest steps. I'm not saying get in the door and go kill yourself for an hour. Get in the door and just walk 5 minutes on the treadmill. Okay. The next day, maybe you spend 10 minutes. Maybe the day after that, you go in, you do a couple exercises. The day after that, you do a little bit more. And it's like I always tell people, this is if you have not been in the gym in years or maybe even your whole life and you're trying to do a certain thing, first of all, you're putting yourself outside of your comfort zone. So that's already a significant step. Getting into the door is even a harder step. But it's like this is a staircase. This is a staircase with maybe 100 steps. You're not going to go from step 1 to step 100. And even if you could, you wouldn't want to do that anyways, because step 100, the beauty about this is whether it's fitness, personal growth, career, whatever, as you're taking these steps, you are becoming a better and better person with each step that you take. I mean, I'm sure that we all know the story of the person who wins the lottery and then, a year, 2 years later, they're back in the same situation financially that they were to begin with. And the reason is because I think one of the key reasons is because they skipped the process on becoming the person who can handle this sort of money. Not the average person can't handle several hundred millions of dollars. I mean, unless you are really gifted with a very uh, just a very unique mind to handle this thing. Most people can't handle that, and so skipping the process of anything, man. That's why the same thing with the overnight successes of weight loss and these kind of things. I mean, these things just don't last because we don't. The reason we don't last is because we don't become the person who is capable of handling these things. I want to touch on something else too that I think is really relevant to this that you've already mentioned about, and which is accountability. The reason that accountability is so important is not because, yes, you're being honest, and it is a honest and moral thing to accept your faults and repair those faults for whatever damage that you have done. And this goes for divorce, this goes for your personal life, whatever it is. Accountability is super important. But not taking accountability for whatever thing puts the power of that change into the hands of another person. Whereas if you accept accountability, okay, this is what I did right. And I'm not saying no person is 100% at fault for any failure of a relationship, right? Nobody. But I'm saying if you take accountability for what you did, you say, you know what, this is my accountability. This is where I messed up. That puts the power of change and improvement back into your hands. I mean, and it sounds like such, man, it sounds like such a cliche thing. Cause I know with your audience and the people that you talk to, the people that you work with, you know, unfortunately, these divorces are probably never pretty. I mean, there's probably a lot of, you know, the name calling and all this kind of thing. And it's hard to see this in the moment, but it's like, okay, this is where this is where we're at. This is what we're going through. Are we going to go through this and just go through this and just be miserable about it? Or are we going to take something from this with us to the next phase of wherever we're going to be? You know, and I don't mean after life. I mean, within this life, the next step of life. And it's just, that's just one of the reasons accountability is so important. And going back to the martial arts thing, that's one of the reasons why I think, other than just the practical reasons of the skill, I think that most men should practice some form of martial arts, because it does teach you, not necessarily the accountability part, but how to take that, how to be okay with being in a spot where there's improvement to be made, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's the hardest part for most men.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I mean, at its even more simple, most men just have trouble asking for help to begin with. And, you know, we tend to think we know everything. And, you know, you see that joke all the time. Women will always joke that men won't ask for directions. I mean, there's truth to it. I mean, that's kind of it. And I think this whole idea of personal development in general, it's just like therapy and other things. Like, guys just kind of look at it like, I don't need that. I don't need that. And the truth of the matter is, everybody needs it. Everybody needs to work on themselves if you expect to go anywhere. Now, you know, I love how you always talk about like forming an identity. And because I think this is one of the things, and I started with this, but I really think this is one of the things that a lot of men struggle with is, you know, when you're coming out of a marriage and you're a father, what's your identity? Oh, I'm a father and I'm a provider. You know, like you have these identities that you get, you know, when you're in a marriage, and now you're coming out of it. And maybe you never thought about having any other identity but that. And in order to sort of move forward, you've got to figure out who you are, like who you are, who you're going to be, what's the next chapter of your life going to look like. So talking about that, how do you even go about figuring out who you are? Is it really should you just start going down the road that you've been talking about? Maybe diving into fitness, maybe just diving into personal development, you know, reading books, listening to podcasts, you know, sort of like just try to figure things out and just let it present itself? Or is there a more proactive thing that you think you could do to sort of figure out the person you're supposed to be?
You know, specifically talking about I'm not a father, so I don't have children, so maybe I can't comment on this, but just, I think the lessons are still relevant. Talking about the guys who have that identity as a father, I think one of the shared admirable traits about that is that they will protect and provide for their families. I mean, that's something that I think that we can all agree on, that people, you know, in that role, sort of, that's a responsibility that they are willing to take on. And this whole personal growth thing, it's very easy to look at it and say that it is a selfish thing, that is this, you know, going to the gym or focusing on yourself or building yourself up. It's easy to look at these things and say that they are selfish things. But the reality is, if you have people that are connected to you, if you have a family, if you have a wife, if you have whoever, a company with employees, whatever, if people are connected to you, if you are improving yourself in the right way, and if you not necessarily focusing on yourself, but if you are improving yourself, working on yourself, doing what you can to progress your personal growth, anybody who is connected to you will benefit from that. You know, so a real simple example, we're talking about fitness. A real simple example is, you know, being fit. If you are so out of shape that you cannot, you know, play with your children or socialize with your children or do whatever it is that you want to do with your children. Or if let's play the long game. If you are not taking care of your health, then you're not going to be around too long to even be with your children. I mean, there's so many different ways we could take this. But if you are pursuing personal growth the correct way, and I can't speak for women, but as a man, everybody's going to benefit. Everybody who is connected to you is going to benefit from that. And so I think that what I would say is to do whatever it is that's going to help you be a better man, a better father, a better husband. I know we're talking about divorce, but you're probably going to find somebody else. You're going to find another woman, whether you get married or not. Again, that's kind of up to you, but there are going to be people, divorce or not, there are still people in your life who depend on you and who will benefit from the best version of you. And so my thing is, if you love a person, why not give them the best version of you? I mean, is that not what love is? Because yes, you can cater to a person the way they want to be loved, but it's like, if you can't give yourself 100%, if your cup is not full to give, you're only going to give that person part of you. So I would say do what it is to be able to give the best you. And that's going to look different for everybody. That's going to be different for some people, getting in the gym and overcoming that mental battle every day and just becoming mentally fit as they're coming physically fit. That maybe that works for some people. For some people, it's pursuing a higher education to be a better financial provider. I mean, whatever it is, it's going to be different for everybody, but there are ways for all of us to improve. And I think that we know what those things are. I think individually we all know what those things are. It's just leaning into that and doing it. But I mean, the personal growth should always, if it's done right, it should always benefit everybody else. So I think what we need to do is we need to figure out what those ways are for us and just do it, man. I mean, like, you're almost like, you're never going to feel 100% ready for a thing. And I think we could talk all day about the feeling that when you don't feel like it's the right time to jump, that is the exact time to jump. I mean, there's nothing else I can say other than that. I mean, it's going to be different for everybody. Do what you have to do to improve yourself and progress your personal growth, because everybody's going to feel that.
Yeah. I've had a great coach who has taught how really the hardest thing to do is to make a decision. And then the universe sort of just shows you the how later on. And you can't worry about the how in order to decide to make the decision, because you'll never make the decision.
Yep.
It's sort of like, like you want to be fit. Well, don't worry about how you're going to get there. Just make the decision you're going to do it, then start with one step and it'll sort of present itself. I also think in listening to you talk, one of the things I think that is very, very difficult for most men to do, it's very similar to someone who's like an alcoholic or has a drug problem, is admitting that there's a problem, or admitting that there's something that you need to do to improve yourself. So many guys will come out of a marriage and will take no personal responsibility for what just happened. Oh, well, my wife cheated on me, so that's why we're getting divorced. Or, my wife's bipolar, that's why we're getting divorced, without any kind of introspective look about what they just contributed and why the person they are helped put them in this position that they're currently in. And if you can come to terms with that, then everything you're saying should make a lot more sense, that there's all this room for improvement. There's all this room to improve. And the one thing that I'm sure you won't disagree with is you're never done improving. The journey never ends, ever ends. And when you think you're to a point, you're still not there. And another thing you were saying that really just I smiled a little bit about is the guys who were like, are getting divorced. They tell me to a T, Cody, I am never getting married again. I am never getting married again. They come out, I'm never doing it. And let me tell you something, 90% of them are remarried within just a few years. And it makes me so nervous, because I know that if they didn't work on themselves at all, from the time they got divorced to the time they got in the new relationship, their new relationship is just going to be a repeat performance. Like, you just know it is. Like, there's no question it's going to be a repeat performance. So I really think that's all super important. Um, I want to dive a little bit like into the fitness part of this, even a little bit more, because I really feel like just people are not healthy anymore, especially after they come out of trauma. They just aren't healthy. And you said something on your podcast that I just loved. And I've already said it once, but I'm gonna say it again. Going to the gym is not the same thing as being fit. It's just
Mm-hmm.
not. I mean, I crack up when I go. I see guys that are in there in the morning, and then I'll see the same guys there in the afternoon. And they might be muscular guys. They might, like, on the surface, look like they're healthy, but I guarantee you, I asked them to run around the building once, they'd probably pass out.
Mm-hmm.
Or even more than that, I'll see guys with big like chests and biceps and stuff, and like a big old belly, and I'm like, this isn't being fit. It's like you're doing something, that maybe makes you feel good, but it's not being fit. And I think our culture has equated like this, being fit with like this chiseled look. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you need to have like, see your abs, and you need to do this, and you need to do that. What is the criteria in your mind for just knowing that you are a fit person without all those things I just said, all those things that are out there that you're going to look at?
It's funny that you bring that up because we can talk about ways to seek external validation. We could talk about, how a lack of self-confidence how that shows up in our world. And at a certain point, if you are going to the gym just so you can seek validation from an external force, those are the same things. I mean, you're right. That is not being fit. That's not implementing your own fitness plan. If you're doing that just to impress people or seek validation or whatever, I mean, it's the same thing, just in a different. It's the same skeleton, just in a different shell, basically. Mm. But to me, what something that the way I think of myself as fit, or I guess parameters around my fitness, what I consider to be fit is, I want to look a certain way, I want to feel a certain way, I want to be able to live a certain life. But my thing is, and this is the difference between a person who goes to the gym and a person who is fit. So if you go to the gym, okay, you're going to the gym, you're going to do whatever you say. But if you are a fit person, again, going back to the identity, this is my identity. I'm not just a person who goes to the gym. I am a fit person. Okay, so what does that mean for me? That means for me, I'm going to watch the diet that I eat. I'm going to make sure that, I limit the sugars and all that kind of stuff, limit the alcohol, all the unhealthy stuff. I'm going to not only filter what I eat, what I drink, I'm going to filter what the information, the energy that comes into my mind, being around I'm sure we all know about the complaining and the negativity. I mean, this world, there's plenty of that to go around. And so being a fit person is that identity, because you take in what you eat, what you look at, what you see, what comes in your mind, what you consume, and then how you process that information into the world. So I don't know, a quick example is, let's say that through fitness, you build self-discipline with yourself, and then that self-discipline turns into a pattern, because now you have this self-discipline aspect to it, and then that filters into something else. A really good example of this is I talk about self-confidence a lot, building self-confidence. One of the best ways to do that is to have self-discipline with yourself, is to keep a promise that you make to yourself. Real quick example. You tell yourself you're going to go to the gym Monday, Wednesday, Friday. If you do that consistently over a long enough period of time, you become a person that you can trust. And that bleeds into other areas of your life, because then, let's say you've been doing that for a couple months. Okay, you're keeping the promises that you make to yourself. You learn that you can trust yourself, tell yourself that you're going to do a thing, and then you actually do it. So now comes along, you have intuition about something. You have this, you feeling this feeling about something. Oh man, I want to start this business, or I just don't feel right about this person. So when you have that intuition, it's like, what you've done before that, whether or not you keep the promises to yourself, can you even trust what you feel about yourself? Like, how do you, like, this thought comes to you, you're like, okay, let's look back over the past. Okay, I kept all these promises that I made to myself. I can actually trust myself. I'm going to go through with this intuition. I'm going to follow this gut feeling that I have. Versus if you don't, if you tell yourself, well, it's just me. I'm just like, nobody else is going to be hurt from this. I can just skip today, whatever. And then those thoughts come, you're like, oh man, I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I can trust myself enough. I don't know, and then I think we can all agree that self-confidence, especially as men in the world that we live in, because it's so hyper competitive, it is one of the key aspects that we need to progress our life to the next level possible. I mean, you cannot try to do anything unless you absolutely 100% believe in yourself. Because I think we can all agree also that we as men, and you don't even have to be a father for this, but especially if you're a father, if you're an employer who employs people, there are people around you that, whether they tell you or not, they look up to you, they admire, they respect you, they believe in you. And so you have to be able to believe in yourself, because these people, they can't believe in you if you can't believe in yourself. And I think sometimes, well, I think the lack of self-confidence is a real big problem. But I'm not sure if that answered your question or not.
Oh yeah. There's no right or wrong answer. I love your perspective. I think that it's really refreshing, because I've read more self-improvement books than I care to admit, listened to more podcasts than I care to admit, been through all kinds of coaching. I love the way that you're discussing all of this, because I really feel like most of the average guys listening to this podcast can probably understand what you're saying and how it could relate to their lives. Again, the first thing is you just got to make a decision that you're going to make a change. Like, you have to just make the decision. And then I think you're absolutely right. And then whatever you start doing to start making the change, you have to keep those promises to yourself. And that's why but you have to start with small things. I liked what you said earlier, like, you go to the gym, do the treadmill for 5 minutes, or do it for 10 minutes. Don't go and say, oh, I'm going to go to the gym today. It's my first day. I haven't been to the gym in, 3 years. I'm going to go and I'm going to do 2 hours there. I'm going to do, 45 minutes of cardio. I'm going to do, 30 minutes of this. I'm going to do 15 minutes of that. It's just not realistic, because you're going to set yourself up for failure. And the second you fail, you're not going to trust yourself to go back. All of a sudden you're going to be like, well, I couldn't do it last time. I mean, I think that's so right. So, I mean, start small. I mean, everything starts small. I'm sure whenever you went down your fitness path, you probably didn't say, I'm going to start. I don't know how many days you go to the gym now, but you probably weren't like, oh, I'm going to go 7 days a week and I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. every day and I'm going to do 2 hours a day at the gym. You probably didn't say that to yourself, because it's crazy. You're just setting yourself up for failure. So I think that's something that's a big takeaway I'm getting from everything you've been saying is, you've got to make a decision, but you've also got to be realistic about, doing it. Otherwise you're not going to follow through. I mean, how many of us start something and we don't finish? I mean, that's like, it's like everything. It's like people start things all the time and they just don't finish. And it's a little crazy. And I think, and this stemming from this talk about divorce, you're already kind of in that position where you just promised yourself you were going to be, in a marriage, you made a vow, you are in this marriage, and now it has ended. So you're already sort of feeling like you failed at something. You're already kind of in that kind of mindset that you've failed at this thing, being a father or being a husband, whatever. You've got to sort of just pivot. You got to pivot quickly and get back on the right track. Otherwise, it's just going to start all over again. I'm kind of wondering, are there other resources that you recommend that people go look at? Maybe if they're a reader, are there any books or resources that you like? If they're not really a reader, but maybe they like to listen to podcasts. I mean, I know you've got a great podcast, which I want to talk to you a little bit about in a second, but is there any other resources that you might point guys at?
So, it's really hard to pinpoint resources because they're going to benefit and affect everybody differently. I would tell everybody to this is what I would say. You need at least one, maybe multiple resources for your physical health. You need a resource for your mental health. You need a resource for your emotional health, and you need a resource for your spiritual health. Now, I'm not saying you have to believe in a higher power. I'm not saying you have to believe in God, but you have to have something that is going to nurture each one of those areas of your life. That's I think, because when I mean, you could be the absolute most fit person that's ever walked the face of the earth, but if you are not mentally healthy, if you're not spiritually healthy or emotionally healthy, the physical is only going to take you so far, and vice versa, one or the other. I mean, they're only going to take you so far. So I would say, you know, podcasts, especially these days, people are busy. We have a lot going on. I mean, podcasts are a great way to get those resources. It can be a podcast on business, fitness, personal growth, masculinity, spirituality. I mean, anything. You can have a podcast about anything and listen to it while you're doing other things. You can listen to the podcast, like, just say you could listen to a motivational speech podcast in the gym, and then right there you're hitting two things simultaneously. You're hitting your mental health and you're hitting your emotional or your physical health. The emotional health, the emotional and spiritual health. I really recommend journaling to people, because journaling, it helps you sort of condense your thoughts and filter your thoughts onto paper. And so you understand better what your thoughts actually are. Because especially, with, like you said earlier, men don't like to talk about issues. They don't like they like to see therapy as a weakness and this kind of thing. But it's like, whether we want to admit it or not, we have these thoughts, we have these things, we have emotions just like everybody else. I think what we do with those thoughts and emotions, and how we express those, if we express those, to what person we express those, is sort of a different thing. But I think that just at least recognizing what those are, and I think a good way to do that is to write those down. Because if not, you just have sort of all these thoughts kind of just doing their own thing, and everything's just kind of all over the place. Or you can just once a week take 10 minutes, just write down. It doesn't have to be a full story. Just write down whatever your thoughts are. Just whatever your thoughts that day, write them down. Okay. And then what you'll find, not only will that help you organize your thoughts, but you will also be able to, I think, communicate better, because you're writing, frequently. You're writing things out, which is a big improvement. So yeah, the podcast, the journaling, prayer, if you're into that, in that kind of thing, meditation, if you're into that, proper sleep. I really wish someone would have told me when I started this fitness journey how important sleep was. And, it is something that simply cannot be overlooked, because we want to think that, food and diet is important, and it is, but you can go longer without food than you can without sleep. Sleep is so important to your body, to your mind, to your emotional health. And you simply, these days, if I'm fortunate enough, if I can put something off to the next day to make sure it doesn't disrupt my sleep, I absolutely do that, because the sleep is going to be foundational to your health. So I think if a person could get a resource in maybe each of those areas, I think that's really kind of what we need. And reading too. I mean, reading is great. I think these days we have audiobooks. And so if you can use those, if you can utilize those, and I know a lot of people say, oh, well, I can't retain information if I listen to it. But, even if you listen to an audiobook, if you only retain 10% of the information, I mean, that's 10% that you didn't have to begin with, so, because I understand people claim they don't have time to read. And I get that people are busy, but before, can I say, just because I know we're short on time, can I say this really quick? I want to say, we were talking about, personal growth and being, divorced and getting divorced and this kind of thing. And I'm sure you've seen this, and this is kind of a controversial take, but from the people that I've talked to and what I've seen is, a lot of times, you meet a woman and you're dating and whatever, she's attracted to you, and maybe you're already in the gym, maybe you're not, maybe you have these things going on, you have a career you're trying to do and this kind of thing. And what I see is that a lot of times, and I'm not saying at all that divorce is all of men's fault. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying a lot of times men get kind of focused on the relationship, and then they stop taking care of themselves. They stop pursuing things that they would have normally. They just simply become a different person. And I know things happen on the woman end also, but it seems like that the person that the woman met initially and was attracted to initially, eventually, for whatever reason, that person fades. And so what I would recommend is just sort of, I'm not saying when I say this, people think that I'm saying something I'm not. I'm not saying to put your wife or your woman sort of, as a secondary or on the back burner, so to speak. But I'm saying, if you just continue that personal growth, if you continue to pursue that thing, that career, whatever it is, if you continue to do those things, I think what a lot of times we'll find is that I don't think we won't lose that either attraction or respect or both. We won't lose that if we can maintain that sort of direction, that sort of mentality. And I know that's a controversial take. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it should be right or wrong. I'm just saying it seems to be that happens more often than not. And I know there's a lot of other factors involved, but that does happen, I think.
No, I don't think that's controversial at all. I think I pretty much agree with what you just said, because that's exactly what happens. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the identity that guys start to take on, that maybe they didn't really consciously choose. They just think that's what they have to do because they're men. Like the provider, the guy who just goes and works all day every day and then comes home and doesn't take care of themselves. It happens, and then marriages end. But yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
For sure.
Well, I don't want to end this without you telling us a little bit about your podcast and what you are seeking to accomplish in it, the types of topics that you cover, and where people can find it.
Yep. So I appreciate that. So the podcast is the Pure Wisdom Podcast, PURE Wisdom Podcast. It is the main platform is Spotify. It's also on YouTube, all the Spotify platform. I mean, all the podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google, all those. So the main message of the podcast is kind of the things we talked about here: personal growth, self-improvement. There's some financial talk on there, some spirituality. There's some dating talks on there. So I think people who are trying to get back in the dating world, I talk to dating coaches and that kind of thing. So maybe they can, benefit from some of those conversations. As far as the purpose of the podcast, people ask me that, and it's crazy because I think it's 50-50 me trying to learn and continue to learn things and talking to people, talking to a person that knows way more about me in whatever area we're talking about. And then the other half is people learning from that. And then also learning, me sharing some of the lessons that I've learned, and just, I think what we're doing here is we're simultaneously, I'm learning things, people are learning from hearing me learn things, and then people are learning from me, share my experiences. So I hope it's doing is I hope it's benefiting everybody, the guests, the audience, and myself. And so, yeah, it's a personal growth and self-improvement podcast, and that's sort of the main theme. But there's a lot of different things that are covered on there, but it's generally in that area.
Well, if our conversation was any evidence, people will learn a lot from listening to your podcast. So I hope everyone goes and checks it out. Well, I really appreciate you being here today, Cody, and sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.